Sometimes the person everyone ignores is the only one who sees death coming. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe courage can come from the most unexpected people, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, back to Ava Brooks. Ava Brooks had learned long ago that invisible people notice the details everyone else missed. Working as a waitress at the Imperial Crown Hotel meant blending into polished marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and conversations that belonged to people whose watches cost more than her yearly salary. She never interrupted. She never stared. She simply carried silver trays, refilled crystal glasses, and disappeared before anyone remembered her face. That morning had begun like every other shift. Diplomats exchanged quiet handshakes beneath towering windows. Business executives laughed over million-dollar contracts. Classical piano drifted softly through the grand lobby while sunlight spilled across the black marble like liquid gold. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. The elevator doors opened with a quiet chime, and the atmosphere changed instantly. Conversations faded. Hotel staff instinctively straightened their posture. 6 men dressed in tailored black suits stepped out first, scanning every corner with disciplined precision. Their movements were silent, efficient, practiced. Only after they secured the lobby did the man they protected finally appear. Ethan Park walked forward without the slightest hint of urgency. His black velvet suit embroidered with subtle gold patterns reflected the morning light as though it had been made for royalty rather than business. Thick dragon tattoos disappeared beneath the collar of his shirt before reappearing across his powerful hands wrapped around a pair of black leather gloves. His dark hair was slicked back perfectly. His expression revealed nothing. Fear followed some men. Respect followed others. Ethan Park carried both. Ava lowered her eyes as he approached the hotel entrance. She had no reason to notice him any more than any other influential guest. Then something flashed. Just once. A tiny pulse of white light flickered. Across the polished surface of a silver champagne bucket resting beside the VIP lounge. Most people would have mistaken it for sunlight bouncing through the towering windows. Ava didn't. The angle was impossible. Sunlight didn't blink. It searched. Her breathing slowed. Instead of looking toward the rooftops like everyone else would have, she watched the distorted reflection dancing across the curved metal. The tiny flash appeared again. Higher this time. A fraction of dark glass. The edge of a long barrel. An optical lens adjusting almost imperceptibly behind a distant office window. A sniper. Her pulse struck hard against her ribs. Ethan continued walking toward the revolving doors completely unaware. Outside, a black armored sedan waited at the curb. The driver stood beside the rear passenger door with perfect posture, one hand resting calmly on the handle. Ava's eyes shifted toward him for only a second. He casually nudged the sedan forward a few inches before glancing almost invisibly toward the opposite building. The movement lasted less than a heartbeat. Yet every instinct inside Ava screamed that it wasn't random. It was a signal. She looked back at the reflection. The scope settled. Ethan took another step. One more second, and the firing lane would be completely clear. There was no time to shout. No time to convince 6 armed bodyguards that a waitress had just uncovered an assassination. There was only time to move. The silver tray slipped from Ava's hands, exploding across the marble floor in a shower of crystal. Every head turned toward the sound. Before anyone understood what was happening, Ava sprinted through the frozen crowd, grabbed Ethan Park's silk tie with both hands, and yanked him backward with every ounce of strength she possessed. Her voice trembled, but her eyes never left the deadly reflection. "Don't move," she whispered. "There's a sniper. Your driver set you up." 6 pistols cleared their holsters before Ethan Park's body had fully stopped moving. The sharp metallic clicks echoed across the marble lobby, louder than the crystal glasses still rolling across the floor. Years of elite security training took over instantly. Neutralize the threat. Protect the chairman. Ask questions later. Ava never saw which bodyguard hit her first. A powerful shoulder slammed into her chest, throwing her backward across the polished marble. Pain shot through her spine as the air rushed from her lungs. The silver tray spun away, scattering broken glass beneath expensive leather shoes, while terrified guests screamed and dove behind marble columns. Someone dropped a champagne flute. Someone else pulled out a phone. Within seconds, Dozens of cameras were recording what looked like an attempted attack on one of the most feared men in the country. "She's attacking the chairman," a businessman shouted. "Shoot her," another voice yelled without hesitation. Two bodyguards pinned Ava to the freezing floor. One twisted her arm behind her back, while another pressed the cold barrel of a pistol against the side of her head. Her cheek rested on shattered crystal. Tiny cuts stung her skin, but she barely noticed. Her eyes remained fixed on Ethan. "Don't move," the security chief barked. "One more movement, and you're dead." Around them, hotel employees fled toward emergency exits. Guests hid behind furniture. The elegant morning atmosphere disappeared beneath panic, broken glass, and shouted commands echoing through the enormous lobby. Ethan stood perfectly still inside the protective circle formed by his security team. For bodyguards blocked every possible angle, while two more scanned rooftops through compact tactical optics. Yet Ethan himself wasn't looking upward. He was looking at the young black waitress lying on the floor. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She wasn't trying to escape. That alone felt wrong. Most people staring down the barrel of a gun showed terror. Ava showed urgency. "Search her," Ethan said calmly. The order surprised everyone. The guards quickly emptied her apron pockets onto the marble floor. A folded order pad, 2 pens, lip balm, a room service receipt, a small family photograph. Nothing even remotely resembling a weapon. "She's clean," one guard reported. "That doesn't mean she's innocent," another replied immediately. "She could be working with the shooter." Ava swallowed painfully before forcing herself to speak. "Don't look at the roof." Several guards instinctively raised their eyes anyway. "No," she said, shaking her head despite the pistol still touching her temple. "Look at the reflection." Confused silence spread through the security detail. Ethan narrowed his eyes, but said nothing. Ava slowly shifted her gaze toward the silver champagne bucket lying on its side only a few feet away. Sunlight shimmered across its polished surface. "Not the building," she whispered. "The reflection." Ethan turned his head almost imperceptibly. Instead of searching the skyline, he focused on the curved metal bucket. For a brief moment, all he saw was distorted sunlight. Then a tiny white flash flickered across the reflection. It disappeared, returned, moved. His expression changed almost invisibly. The light wasn't random. It was sweeping, searching, aligning. A sniper's scope. Ethan raised one hand. Every bodyguard instantly fell silent. "Move," he said quietly. "Now." His final word had barely left his lips when a deafening crack split the air. The revolving glass doors exploded inward as a high-caliber bullet tore through the exact space where Ethan Park's head had been less than 1 second earlier. Crystal erupted like frozen rain. Screams filled the lobby. The first shot had missed. But what made Ethan's blood run cold wasn't the sniper anymore. It was the man standing beside the armored sedan outside. His driver wasn't looking toward the shattered entrance. He was looking directly at Ethan, waiting to see whether the bullet had finished the job. The bullet crossed the lobby faster than human eyes could follow. People didn't actually see it. They heard the violent crack a heartbeat later as tempered glass exploded into thousands of glittering fragments. The revolving doors shattered inward. Crystal rained across the black marble floor. Guests screamed and threw themselves behind marble pillars. Someone crawled beneath the reception desk. Others stood frozen, unable to understand how a peaceful morning had become a battlefield in less than 2 seconds. Ethan Park reacted instantly. He grabbed the nearest marble column as 2 bodyguards threw themselves between him and the ruined entrance. Another pair rushed toward the doors with compact rifles already raised. Every movement was fast. Every command was precise. But the sniper never fired a second shot. Whoever had pulled the trigger expected Ethan to collapse immediately. Instead, the target had vanished the exact moment the rifle discharged. "North building," one security officer shouted into his radio. 24th floor. "Move." 3 tactical teams stormed toward the elevators while others sealed every entrance to the hotel. Outside, police sirens already echoed through the city as terrified pedestrians fled from the shattered entrance. Through the broken glass, Ethan noticed something that made his heartbeat slow instead of accelerate. His driver had not rushed toward him. He had not looked toward the rooftop. He had not reacted like everyone else. He simply stood beside the armored sedan, watching Ethan with quiet disappointment. almost as if waiting for confirmation that something had failed. "Bring him here," Ethan ordered. Two security officers sprinted toward the curb. The driver finally moved. He glanced once over his shoulder, released the rear passenger door, and calmly walked away from the sedan. Then, without warning, he broke into a full sprint toward the underground parking garage. "Stop him!" Ethan's command echoed across the ruined lobby. Four bodyguards immediately gave chase, disappearing through the smoke and confusion outside. Ava remained pinned against the marble floor. The pistol had not left her head, yet nobody seemed interested in her anymore. Their attention had shifted toward the fleeing driver. She slowly lifted her eyes toward Ethan. "He's not trying to escape," she whispered. Ethan turned back. "What?" "He's buying time." The security chief frowned. "For who?" Ava looked toward the shattered entrance where tiny pieces of glass still sparkled across the floor. "For whoever planned the second move." Ethan studied her carefully. There was no panic in her voice, no triumph. She sounded like someone reading the next page of a book she had already seen before. He stepped closer, ignoring the protests from his security. "Chief, how did you know?" Ava hesitated only briefly. "Because I wasn't watching the sniper." Ethan said nothing. "I was watching the geometry." Confused expressions spread across the room. Ava looked toward the champagne bucket, still lying on its side. "The reflection showed me where the rifle was aiming." She shifted her eyes toward the black sedan outside. "The driver's tiny adjustment showed me where you were supposed to stand." Ethan slowly turned toward the curb. The armored sedan had indeed been moved only a few inches. Such a small change seemed meaningless to everyone else. But from the sniper's position across the street, those few inches had created a perfect firing corridor between two marble columns. Ethan's jaw tightened. This had not been luck. It had been engineering. At that exact moment, one of his intelligence officers rushed into the lobby carrying a tablet, his face drained of color. "Chairman," he said, struggling to catch his breath. "We just verified the driver's identity." He swallowed hard before continuing. "The man who worked for you wasn't your driver at all. The real driver disappeared 6 months ago, and no one inside our organization ever noticed." The operations room overlooking the shattered hotel lobby was unusually quiet. Dozens of surveillance monitors replayed the assassination attempt from every possible angle, yet no one dared speak. Ethan Park stood motionless before the largest screen, tiny shards of glass still clinging to the shoulders of his black velvet jacket. His expression remained unreadable, but everyone around him understood one thing. Someone had penetrated the most secure circle in his organization without leaving a single warning. "Replay camera 12, Ethan said. The technician immediately obeyed. The footage rolled backward until the armored sedan appeared outside the entrance. "Slow it down." The video dropped to quarter speed. Every pair of eyes followed the fake driver. At first, nothing looked suspicious. He stepped out of the sedan, walked toward the rear passenger door, adjusted his gloves, then casually nudged the vehicle forward a few inches before looking toward the opposite office building. It was such a small movement that nobody had questioned it during the attack. Ethan folded his arms. Again, the technician replayed the sequence. This time, Ava stepped closer to the monitor despite several bodyguards instinctively shifting into defensive positions around her. She ignored them completely. Her attention never left the screen. "Pause," she said quietly. The image froze. Ava pointed toward the front tire. "Zoom here." The technician enlarged the picture until the tire nearly filled the display. Most people still saw nothing unusual. Ava traced an imaginary line across the monitor. "The parking marker." One security officer frowned. "What about it?" The sedan was already perfectly aligned. She looked at Ethan. There was no reason to move it. Ethan remained silent. Ava continued. "The adjustment wasn't for parking." Her fingers slowly traveled across the digital image, connecting the sedan to the hotel entrance and then to the distant office tower visible through the glass doors. It was for the sniper. The room fell completely silent. The ballistics specialist stepped forward carrying a tablet. "Chairman, we've already reconstructed the bullet trajectory." He connected the device to the main display. A three-dimensional model of the hotel appeared. A bright red line traced the path of the rifle round from the opposite building. It passed perfectly through the opening created by the sedan's new position before stopping exactly where Ethan had been standing. Then the specialist restored the sedan to its original location. This time, The red line slammed directly into a thick marble column protecting the hotel entrance. The shot would have failed before it even reached Ethan. Nobody spoke. Even the most experienced members of Ethan's security detail stared at the simulation in disbelief. The difference between life and death measured less than a foot. Ethan slowly turned toward Ava. "How did you notice something my entire security division missed?" Ava lowered her eyes briefly before answering. "Because I wasn't looking for the shooter." Ethan waited. "I was looking for the mistake." Before anyone could ask another question, the operations room door burst open. One of Ethan's intelligence officers hurried inside, carrying a secure tablet, his breathing uneven after running through the hotel corridors. "Chairman." He handed the device to Ethan without another word. On the screen appeared a photograph of Ethan's real driver. The image was stamped with the words "missing person, 6 months old." Below it sat another file. The face belonged to the man who had driven Ethan every day since then. Different fingerprints, different DNA, different identity. Yet the background investigation had shown nothing unusual. Ethan looked up slowly. "Someone replaced my driver half a year ago." The intelligence officer nodded grimly. "Yes, Chairman." He hesitated before continuing. "But that's not the worst part." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Go on." The officer swallowed hard. "The replacement passed every internal security inspection because the authorization came from inside your own executive office. Someone at the highest level personally approved him." No one spoke after the intelligence officer finished. The silence inside the operations room felt heavier than the gunshot that had shattered the hotel lobby only minutes earlier. Ethan Park stared at the 2 personnel files glowing on the monitor. One belonged to the loyal driver who had served his family for nearly 12 years before disappearing without a trace. The other belonged to the man who had quietly taken his place 6 months ago under a stolen identity. Every background check had been approved. Every security clearance had been signed. Every door had been opened from the inside. Ethan slowly looked around the room. These were the people responsible for protecting one of the most powerful organizations in the country. Yet someone had walked straight through every layer of security without raising a single alarm. "Seal the executive network," Ethan said calmly. "No one leaves. No one accesses another file until I authorize it." His security chief nodded immediately and began issuing encrypted commands. Around the room, analysts disconnected workstations from the main server while cyber specialists isolated internal communications. Whoever had approved the fake driver's identity was still somewhere inside the organization. Ava remained quietly beside the surveillance screens. She could feel dozens of suspicious eyes drifting toward her every few seconds. To many of them, she was still only a waitress who happened to be in the right place at the right time. Others were beginning to wonder whether she knew more than she admitted. Ethan noticed those glances. "Ask your question," he said without turning around. One senior commander finally stepped forward. "Chairman, with respect, how does a hotel waitress recognize a coordinated assassination before trained professionals?" The room became silent again. Ava hesitated for only a moment. "Because I spent years studying scenes exactly like this." I settled on her. "I wasn't always a waitress." Ethan folded his arms but said nothing, allowing her to continue. "I worked as a forensic image reconstruction specialist." Her voice remained steady, almost detached. "My job wasn't chasing criminals. It was rebuilding shootings after they happened. Bullet trajectories, camera synchronization, reflection analysis, sight lines." Several investigators exchanged surprised looks. Ava lowered her eyes briefly. "I spent thousands of hours searching for the one detail everyone else missed." Ethan watched her carefully. "Why did you leave?" For the first time since entering the operations room, genuine sadness crossed Ava's face. "A murder case." She paused before continuing. "My reconstruction proved the suspect couldn't have fired the weapon." She swallowed quietly. The report was ignored. No one interrupted. An innocent man spent 18 months in prison before new evidence finally cleared him. Ava looked toward the shattered hotel entrance visible beyond the glass wall. "Even though the mistake wasn't mine, I couldn't keep doing the work after that." She gave a faint, almost apologetic smile. "So I became invisible instead." Ethan studied her for several long seconds. She wasn't asking for sympathy. She wasn't defending herself. She was simply explaining why she noticed things others overlooked. Before he could respond, one of the cyber analysts suddenly stood up from his workstation. "Chairman." His voice carried unmistakable urgency. We recovered fragments of deleted messages from the fake driver's encrypted device. The room instantly shifted back into motion. The analyst projected a damaged text file onto the main screen. Most of it had been destroyed, but several lines remained readable. Prepare second phase. If the shot fails, divert security. Package must not reach destination. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Package? The analyst shook his head. We don't know what it refers to. Ava quietly stepped closer to the screen, reading the damaged message twice before looking toward the hotel entrance where Ethan's armored sedan still waited behind police barricades. Her expression changed almost imperceptibly. I don't think you were the real target anymore, she said softly. I think someone wanted everyone focused on saving you, while something far more valuable slipped away unnoticed. The damaged message stayed on the screen long after everyone had finished reading it. Prepare second phase. If the shot fails, divert security. Package must not reach destination. Every word pointed toward something bigger than an assassination. Ethan Park walked to the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the ruined hotel entrance. Below, police officers had surrounded his armored sedan with flashing lights while reporters crowded behind barricades, convinced the luxury vehicle was the center of the attack. Ethan watched the scene in silence. Then he asked the question nobody else had. What if the car is exactly where they want us to look? The room fell quiet. Ava slowly turned toward him. For the first time since they met, their thoughts had reached the same conclusion. That's exactly what I was thinking, she said. Several commanders exchanged uncertain glances. Ethan looked back at her. Explain. Ava walked toward the digital map projected across the operations table. She enlarged the hotel's loading docks, underground service corridors, and freight elevators. Professional operations almost never rely on a single objective, she began calmly. They create one event so overwhelming that everyone ignores the second one. Her finger rested on the blinking icon representing Ethan's armored sedan. The sniper forces every officer to protect you. She moved her finger toward the police barricades. The explosion threat forces every investigator to secure the vehicle. Finally, she traced a line toward the hotel's rear loading dock. Meanwhile, nobody is watching what quietly leaves through the service entrance. Ethan studied the map without speaking. The intelligence chief frowned. You're assuming there was another extraction. Ava nodded once. I'm assuming whoever planned this understands human behavior. She looked around the room. When people panic, they protect what seems most valuable. Her eyes returned to the screen. Sometimes that's exactly what the enemy wants. Before anyone could answer, the logistics supervisor hurried into the operations room, carrying several electronic manifests. Chairman. He sounded unsettled. We've reviewed every vehicle that exited the hotel after the shooting. Ethan accepted the tablet. Anything unusual? One maintenance truck. He enlarged the record. It left 8 minutes after the sniper fired. Ethan frowned. Who approved it? Nobody. The supervisor swallowed. Security assumed it belonged to emergency cleanup because of the broken glass. Ava immediately stepped beside Ethan and examined the shipping information. Her eyes paused on the company name. Then they narrowed. This company doesn't exist anymore. Every head turned toward her. How do you know? The intelligence chief asked. Because I investigated one of their warehouses years ago during a reconstruction case. She tapped the screen gently. The business dissolved after a fraud investigation. Someone reused the old registration because nobody would expect anyone to verify a cleaning contractor during a crisis. The cyber analyst immediately searched the state registry. Seconds later, he looked up in disbelief. She's right. Ethan slowly exhaled. Track the truck. Fingers raced across keyboards. Satellite maps appeared across multiple monitors. GPS records loaded one after another before suddenly stopping. The analyst's expression darkened. Signal lost. When? Ethan asked. 14 minutes ago. Silence settled over the room again. Ava stared at the frozen map. Something about it bothered her. Trucks carrying valuable cargo usually disappeared after reaching safety. This one had vanished far too quickly. Chairman, she said quietly. I don't think they wanted the truck to escape. Ethan looked at her. Then what did they want? Ava's eyes drifted toward the armored sedan outside, still surrounded by nearly every available officer. They wanted all of us looking in the wrong direction. Before Ethan could respond, Every surveillance monitor inside the operations room suddenly flickered black. The lights dimmed for less than 2 seconds. Then one live camera feed appeared. It showed the armored sedan from above. Standing calmly beside the driver's door was a hooded figure holding a small remote device. The figure slowly lifted its head toward the camera and smiled. The hooded figure disappeared from the surveillance feed before anyone could react. The screen flickered once, then returned to the hotel's normal camera network as though nothing had happened. For 2 long seconds, absolute silence filled the operations room. Then Ethan Park spoke with the same calm voice that had commanded men through impossible situations for years. "Clear the perimeter. Move everyone away from the sedan. Now." His security chief didn't hesitate. Orders flew through encrypted radios. Outside the hotel, tactical teams sprinted toward the police barricades, waving officers and civilians back from the armored vehicle. Reporters abandoned their cameras. Hotel guests who had been watching from across the street ran for cover. Within moments, the once crowded entrance became a scene of controlled panic. Ava never took her eyes off the surveillance monitor. Something about the hooded figure bothered her. Not the smile, not the remote device, the confidence. Whoever planned this operation wanted every armed officer staring at that sedan. She quietly stepped toward the operations table. "Chairman." Ethan looked at her immediately. "The car isn't the real trap." Several commanders exchanged confused looks. "Explain," Ethan said. Ava enlarged the digital map of the hotel grounds. Nearly every blue icon representing Ethan's security teams had converged around the front entrance. The rear service corridor, however, showed almost no personnel. She pointed toward the nearly empty loading dock. "Look where your people aren't." Ethan followed her finger across the map. His eyes narrowed. Every elite response unit had instinctively protected the chairman and the sedan. Almost nobody had secured the freight corridor connected to the underground service elevators. "They're pulling our security away from something else," Ethan said quietly. Ava nodded. "Every move today has been designed to control your attention." Before anyone could continue, a violent explosion shook the entire building. The armored sedan erupted into a massive fireball that blasted windows outward and sent burning debris spinning across the hotel driveway. The operations room lights flickered violently. Ceiling dust drifted downward as the shockwave rolled through the building. Officers instinctively rushed toward the monitors showing the burning vehicle. Everyone except Ava. She was already running toward the door. Ethan didn't ask why. He simply followed. His bodyguards raced behind them through executive hallways still echoing with alarms and frightened voices. Ava moved with surprising certainty, cutting through a narrow service corridor most guests never knew existed. The smell of industrial cleaners mixed with smoke drifting through the ventilation system. Finally, she stopped so abruptly that Ethan nearly collided with her. "Don't move," she whispered. The corridor ahead looked completely empty. Concrete walls, storage crates, cleaning equipment. Nothing seemed unusual. Ava slowly pointed toward the floor. A faint strand stretched across the hallway, almost invisible beneath the fluorescent lights. It wasn't the wire itself that caught her attention. It was the tiny layer of gray dust missing from one section of the concrete. Someone had recently tightened it. A bomb technician carefully approached with a fiber optic inspection camera. Seconds later, he slowly backed away. "Chairman," he said, his voice unsteady. "Directional charges. Military grade. If we'd rushed through after the explosion." He couldn't finish the sentence. No one needed him to. The entire security team would have walked directly into a second kill zone. Ethan turned toward Ava. Twice in less than an hour, she had seen what dozens of trained professionals had missed. But before anyone could absorb what had just happened, a soft mechanical sound echoed from somewhere beyond the blocked corridor. Everyone looked toward the freight elevator at the far end of the tunnel. The floor indicator, which had been dark only moments before, suddenly illuminated. Instead of going down, the elevator was coming up. The freight elevator climbed one floor at a time, its mechanical hum echoing through the concrete tunnel with almost unbearable slowness. No one spoke. Ethan Park raised one hand, signaling every weapon to remain lowered. Whoever was inside that elevator wanted an armed response. He wasn't about to give them one. The digital floor indicator blinked again. -3, -2, -1. Then it stopped. A soft metallic click echoed through the corridor. The doors remained closed. The silence that followed felt even louder than the explosion outside. Smoke from the destroyed sedan drifted through the ventilation system, filling the underground passage with the bitter smell of burned rubber and concrete dust. Ava never looked away from the elevator. Something still felt wrong. Every trap that day had been carefully designed to manipulate instinct. Every attack had counted on fear forcing people to react without thinking. "Chairman," she whispered, "don't let them decide where you stand." Ethan glanced toward her. She continued watching the elevator doors. "The sniper controlled your movement. The fake driver controlled your position. The bomb controlled your security." She slowly exhaled. "Now they're trying to control your curiosity." Ethan's eyes narrowed. She was right. Every decision they had made since the first gunshot had been a reaction to someone else's plan. He stepped backward instead of forward. "Deploy the reconnaissance drone," he ordered quietly. A compact quadcopter lifted silently into the air and floated toward the elevator. Every officer watched its live video feed. The drone hovered inches from the steel doors before extending a miniature inspection camera through the narrow gap between them. The image appeared instantly on a nearby monitor. Empty. No gunmen. No explosives. No hostages. Only 4 wooden shipping crates stacked neatly against the rear wall. Beside them stood a worn janitor's cleaning cart with a bucket, mops, folded towels, and plastic bottles of detergent. "Looks clear," one tactical officer said. Ava immediately shook her head. "No." The operator zoomed in. The cart looked ordinary. Dust covered the wheels. Cleaning cloths hung naturally from the handle. "Closer," Ava said. The camera moved again, her eyes fixed on one of the mop handles. Unlike every other wooden handle on the cart, this one reflected almost no light. "Stop." The operator froze the image. Ava leaned closer to the monitor. "That's not wood." The bomb technician frowned. "Carbon fiber." Ethan folded his arms. "Meaning?" Ava pointed at the base of the handle. "There's no cleaning residue." She shifted her finger toward a tiny black connector barely visible beneath the grip. "It's an antenna." The communications specialist immediately opened a frequency scanner. His keyboard clicked rapidly before dozens of signal bands filled the monitor. Suddenly one encrypted transmission appeared, pulsing every 2 seconds. "Chairman," he said, unable to hide the surprise in his voice. "Something inside that elevator is broadcasting." Ethan's intelligence chief immediately traced the signal. A digital map expanded across the wall. The transmission wasn't staying beneath the hotel. It was moving through the city's underground utility network, relayed from one hidden repeater to another. "It's leading us somewhere," one commander said. Ava quietly shook her head again. "No." Everyone looked at her. "It's leading us away from somewhere." Silence settled over the corridor. Ethan slowly smiled for the first time that day. Not because the danger had passed, because he finally understood how his enemy thought. "Leave the elevator," he ordered. Several officers looked confused. "Chairman." Ethan turned toward them without hesitation. "If every trap today was built to make us chase what they wanted us to see." His eyes shifted toward Ava. "Then we stopped chasing." At that exact moment, every phone inside the tunnel vibrated simultaneously with an emergency alert from Ethan's intelligence network. The message contained only one sentence. "High security archive. Unauthorized access detected. 27 seconds ago." The emergency alert reached every secure device at exactly the same moment. "High security archive. Unauthorized access detected. 27 seconds ago." The underground corridor fell completely silent. Ethan Park didn't move. Neither did Ava Brooks. For the first time since the sniper's bullet shattered the hotel lobby, the entire pattern finally made sense. The assassination had never been the objective. It had been the distraction. Ethan slowly looked at Ava. She met his eyes with quiet certainty. Neither of them needed to explain it anymore. The real attack had been happening somewhere else all along. "Lock down the archive," Ethan ordered. "Seal every digital gateway. No one enters. No one leaves." His intelligence chief immediately relayed the commands through encrypted channels. Above them, security teams abandoned meaningless search routes and raced toward the company's headquarters several blocks away. Every unnecessary pursuit stopped. Every available resource shifted to protecting the one place that mattered. Ethan turned back toward the abandoned freight elevator. The wooden crates, the hidden antenna, the fake transmitter, the burning sedan. Every piece had been carefully placed to pull his people farther away from the real target. They understood us, Ethan said quietly. They knew exactly how we would react. Ava nodded. Because people don't usually question their own instincts. Her eyes drifted toward the inactive elevator doors. They only question other people's. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. The tension that had filled the day slowly gave way to something quieter. Respect. Not because she had solved every mystery, but because she had refused to ignore the smallest detail when everyone else trusted. Appearances. Hours later, the Imperial Crown Hotel had returned to an uneasy calm. Workers replaced shattered glass. Police barriers disappeared. Guests checked in as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Only one scar remained. A deep groove cut into the marble column beside the entrance where the sniper's bullet had buried itself after missing Ethan by less than an inch. Ethan stood before the damaged stone, running his fingertips across the fractured surface. Power had surrounded him for years. Armored vehicles, intelligence networks, elite bodyguards. None of them had saved his life that morning. A waitress had. Ava quietly approached, still wearing the simple hotel uniform she had started her shift in. Nothing about her appearance suggested she had altered the course of an entire day. Ethan reached into his jacket and removed the black silk tie she had grabbed only hours earlier. It remained wrinkled where her hands had pulled it backward with desperate strength. Most people would have thrown it away and ordered another. Ethan carefully folded it instead. "Are you replacing it?" Ava asked softly. Ethan gave a small shake of his head. No. He looked at the uneven crease running through the fabric. Some reminders become more valuable after they're damaged. The following morning, every senior executive, security commander, and family advisor gathered inside the Kong headquarters boardroom. As Ethan entered, the room rose to its feet. Instead of walking directly to the head of the table, he stopped beside Ava. Without making a speech, without announcing a title, he pulled out the empty chair at his right side. No one questioned the gesture. One by one, every person in the room stepped aside to make space for the woman they had nearly mistaken for a threat. Respect arrived without applause, without celebration, without a single unnecessary word. As the meeting began, Ethan glanced once more at the folded tie resting beside his notebook before looking toward Ava. Power built these walls, he said quietly, but instinct kept them standing. Outside, the city continued with its ordinary rhythm, unaware that an empire still existed because one Black Waitress had dared to grab a Korean Mafia boss by his tie when everyone else saw only another invisible server. And on that day, the people inside that room remembered that true dignity is never measured by a title, a uniform, or the seat someone occupies, but by the courage to act when everyone else is too afraid to see the truth.